Don't let a DUI charge ruin your life. Get a professional and confidential evaluation from our experienced team at True Heights Treatment. Our evaluations are accepted by the majority of courts in the state of Illinois and provide a comprehensive assessment of your substance use patterns and potential treatment needs. Get the help you need today and start your path to a brighter future. Contact us now to schedule your evaluation at 708-248-7039 or at thtdui.com.
The George Brassey podcast is made possible with funding provided from Brassey Global Strategies, LLC, a leading political consulting, public policy, government affairs, and research firm. Are you interested in running for elected office? Need advice? Call or email George 708-769-5015. Brassey Global Strategies 1 at gmail.com.
Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to welcome Daniel Pogorzelski to the podcast. Daniel is running for the commissioner seat on the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District Board. Daniel, thanks for coming on.
The pleasure is all mine, George.
Daniel, tell the listeners, if they have never heard of you, a little bit about your background and why you wanted to run for this office.
Well, thank you so much. So my name is Dan Pogorzelski. If you think that's hard to pronounce, wait until someone asks you to spell it. But if you were to call me Polish Dan, you'd be in good company, as even the honorable chairperson of our Cook County Democratic Party, Tony Preckwinkle, addresses me that way. Who am I? I'm a community activist. I'm a historian. I'm a communicator. I'm a connector. And I'm a booster of all things Chicago, as well as someone who knows about working in and around bureaucracies. So from working for Illinois Treasurer Michael Ferks in civic engagement, being the go-to guy for then State Representative Robert Martwick, to being an organizer for the United Food and Commercial Workers, as being the executive director of a local chamber of commerce, my career has been in public service, and it's always been about connecting with people on the most local level. And the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District, the most, I would argue, the most important government entity that touches our lives, which most people are not aware of, is a unit of government which is so imperative for us to get on people's radars and to communicate if we are going to address the challenges that are inevitable as climate change affects our region.
Talk a little bit about what MWRD's role in general is in the communities that are part of it.
Sure. So the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago, it was a district that was created by the state of Illinois. And for myself, who prides themselves on being a bit of a historian, I've actually co-authored not one, not two, not three, but 4 local history books on Chicago. This entity started as the Chicago Sanitary and Ship Canal District. And the reason for it, here we are on the tail end of a pandemic and before the construction of the Sanitary and Ship Canal, which this entity was brought up as. You had where waterborne diseases and initiated pandemics like cholera that were a regular facet of life. And so this is the government entity that makes sure that when you flush your toilet water, that it's processed safely and that before it's discharged, it is environmentally friendly and will pose no harm, whether it is to our environment or to any of us. And so the fundamental responsibilities: number 1, processing sewage; number 2, making sure that within the district, which is 88% of Cook County, well over 90% with regards to the population, and there's a small couple pockets which in the county are not part of the MWRD district with regards to flood abatement.
I'm curious, Dan, why are some counties, like, for example, the city or municipalities not part of MWRD? Like, for example, the city of Chicago Heights is not part of MWRD, and we are located in Cook County. So we're in that 20 or that 18% that don't belong to MWRD. Why is that?
Well, you have where these boundaries have come come across over time. And so I can't comment on the specific history of why certain municipalities, but what I can say is that even for the municipalities that are not part of the MWRD, like Chicago Heights, we all benefit with regards to making sure that in our region that we keep water safe. Because, for example, just a short example, the headwaters of the Des Plaines River go all the way out to Wisconsin. And so for the different connected watersheds that we have across our region, even if Chicago Heights is not part of that district, it's still very important to make sure with regards to our environment that any of the water that's discharged is done so in a clean and healthy manner, as well as making sure that we fight as best as possible to keep flooding at bay.
That's a very important issue in my district and throughout the city. So thank you for that. Dan, talk a little bit about what role does MWRD play in managing climate today?
Sure. So we cannot manage climate, but what we can do is to try to help municipalities with regards to and through grants and other programs to make sure that we can deal with the rising waters that you have. So floods that used to be once in a century now happen a few times a decade. And this is a reality with a more dynamic climate that unfortunately is accelerating. Right outside, whether you live in Chicago Heights, whether you live in Chicago, whether you live in Schaumburg or Evanston, 20% of the world's fresh water is in the Great Lakes. We are right next to Lake Michigan. Let's remember that many folks have talked about when we're looking at ways to reinvigorate our economy, what people call the blue economy. The Rust Belt, it's had hard times over the past few decades, but the promise of having this treasure, this wealth that we have with fresh water, the fresh coast right here, has been something that has drawn companies in. Lagunitas, bringing production from California to Chicago. Why? Well, if you like good beer, what you need to make sure that you have water that is fresh, that is safe, and that is good to drink. And the water that we discharge is so important that it doesn't have any pollutants, so that with this water we can help bring jobs and help our local communities. Now, with regards to flooding, one of the ways that the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District is working to try to do so is partnering with communities to help create green infrastructure. I'm incredibly proud that I myself have been involved with a number of these initiatives on the northwest side of Chicago. What does that mean? Well, let's start from here. The Deep Tunnel, it's a project which spans Cook County, a series of effectively tunnels that are underground rivers, where in parts of them, you could drive a semi-truck through them. That's how large they are. We started building it in 1975. Going to be completed hopefully in 2029. We'll be able to hold, along with the reservoirs connected to it, 17.5 billion gallons of water. It's an incredible amount. Yet, 1 inch of rainwater all over Cook County is 15 billion gallons. And so, what do we do when we have 2 inches of rain across the county? What about 3 or 4? That will not be adequate to that challenge. And let's remember, the same way that there will be occurrences every so often, we all remember the big snows that people talk about of 1979 and others. Precipitation doesn't only hit in snow. We also get large rainfalls. We've seen what happened in Germany, in the Netherlands earlier this year, and we need to be prepared for that. Where the MWRD is focusing green infrastructure, that means to keep water where it falls so that these systems, whether it's the deep tunnel, whether it's your local sewer system, are not overwhelmed with it. This means bringing impermeable pavers, bioswales, and other methods so that the groundwater, where we have it, can absorb more of the water, taking pressure off this system, which in the tradition of innovation in Chicago is world class. People from and specialists from Singapore, Japan, and other places come to see what Chicago engineers have created. But if we're going to be able to stand up to the challenge, that means through communication, we need to help empower local communities, whether it's Chicago Heights, even if it's not in the MWRD, and others to be able to absorb the rainwater in better ways where they live.
Daniel, you mentioned that Cook County President Tony Preckwinkle calls you Polish Dan. You're officially slated by the Cook County Party. Can you talk a little bit about your team of running mates for MWRD, and what was the slating process like for you?
Sure. So there was 14 candidates that all wanted to run for one of the 4 spots that we have on the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District. So there are 3 that are up for election, as there are every cycle. Much like the U.S. Senate, 1/3 of the body is up every 2 years at election time. I myself am for the last 2 years of the vacancy of Deborah Shore, who's now been appointed by President Biden to be the regional administrator for the Environmental Protection Agency. I am so honored to have been selected by the Cook County Democratic Party after a year of working it. And my slate, I cannot be more proud of my slate. So we have Mariana Spiropoulos, who brings with her a wealth of experience and has been an amazing mentor for all of us while we've been running. Yumika Brown, she's the clerk of Madison, a mother whose son suffered an unfortunate tragedy, which brought to her the perils of untreated water home. Someone who has a record of service. Same with Patricia Teresa Flynn, a trustee in Crestwood, who, thanks to her, was able to bring to light some of the environmental abuses with regards to water in the village of Crestwood. And I have to say, all of us over the past year had the opportunity to get to know each other, and the work ethic that all of my slate mates have, the dedication to the environment. Additionally, one of the things that I think that we all bring to the table is making sure that we have geographic diversity. So aside from all of us who bring to the table many different talents, we all represent different areas of the metropolitan area. And it's so important that throughout all of Cook County, which is a large area, let's remember, Cook County has 5.25 million people. That's larger than 26 states if you were to go by population. And so we're all looking to be the voice of people that live in Cook County to make sure that we can assist them with this very important problem.
And your slate mate, village clerk Yumika Brown, she has been on this podcast, and you can listen to her episode in the archive. She's a great person. Dan, another thing that you're really passionate about is the Polish community, being Polish yourself. Talk a little bit about being one of the first countywide Polish candidates in a long time.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. I appreciate that, George. I know that you are from Chicago Heights, and one of the unique connections, if I remember correctly, is that Chicago Heights' sister city is Wadowice, Poland, yes, which is the hometown of Pope John Paul II, the place which every Pole always immediately connects with the pontiff from the land of the White Eagle. So yes, I myself have been very involved with the Polish community. In fact, actually was able to lead 2 initiatives, which in Chicago on the same day are connected to my Polish heritage. One, I mentioned green infrastructure. So in the neighborhood of Avondale, I was part of an effort which closed off a local street, turning that area into a community plaza. We've had concerts there for over 8 years. But aside from being a nexus for our local area, we actually have where it's also a flood abatement feature. And so it can hold up to 3,400 gallons in a storm event with a combination of native plantings, the way that the seating area doubles as a retention area to hold water. And in January of this past year, we're to give honor to the Polish community that lives there, as well as the solidarity of locals. The neighborhood is no longer an exclusively Polish neighborhood. It's multicultural, multiracial, and diverse, and we're very proud of that. Is now officially named Solidarity Triangle, precisely for that reason. Additionally, had where a very well-known author by the name of Gertrude Kolmar, whose family roots trace back to the vicinity of Chocież, Poland. She herself wrote in German, but her father had come from Chocież. My own family actually traces its some of our relatives that still live in that area. She unfortunately died in Auschwitz, just like my great-grandfather. And to give honor to that, the Chicago Park District will be opening up a 45-day comment period with unanimous support of commissioners, after which it is likely, and we are hoping, that the official decision to rename Kolmar Park after Gertrude Kolmar. She wrote in German. Her family roots trace back to Polish, and she was murdered because of the fact that she was Jewish. That these two symbols that connect Chicago with Poland will be something that we'll be able to show that is alive and well.
The Polish community has had a long history with the city of Chicago and the state of Illinois as a whole. Do you think that there'll ever be a large-scale Polish immigration back to the United States in the present day like there was in the past?
We never know what history has. The hope is that, of course, as somebody that loves Poland, I want to make sure that we keep our connections with Poland. But so often that emigration has been tied with geopolitics. And so recently collaborated with Gina Valentine, a very noted artist, who is doing an installation about the many different ethnic groups that have come to Chicago over time with a timeline. And with every nationality that has been selected as part of this on a timeline, so that folks got to see where in this timeline that ethnic group had come in largest numbers to the Chicagoland area. George, any idea what decade over the past 2 decades that Poles came in the largest numbers to the Chicagoland area? One little thing I do want to say, there were Poles here in Chicago before the city even had its official municipal charter, which was, people debate, was it 1833, was it 1837? So George, when do you think that the most Poles came to Chicago? What decade?
I'm just going to say the 1990s.
Nope. 1940 to 1950, which makes sense. That was World War II. That's when so many Poles, and there were plenty of Poles that came in the 1890s, but you're on the right track, right? So in 1980, you had martial law was declared, and you had a political turmoil, and that's exactly what this. I guess my answer goes back to. That political turmoil has often been what has led Poles to come here to Chicago. And so my hope is that, as many are worried that Russia will invade Ukraine, that Poland will be safe, and that although we border with Russia in the Kaliningrad Oblast, a little exclave that they have just to the north of Poland, that Poland will not be next.
Dan, what are 2 books that have been important to you as a person, and why?
Oh Lord, I mean, there's so many wonderful books, but I actually will start with the first one. So it's actually The Chicago River by Professor Saltzman. He was actually my professor at school, and he taught a political geography class. I even had the opportunity years later where Professor Salzman, who unfortunately he is no longer with us, had actually created and given tours of the Chicagoland River. And it was a book which, with such passion, I would even say poetry, talked about not only the geography of the Chicagoland area, but beautifully laid out the rivers, the ecology, and I would say definitely stoked my interest with regards to the unique wealth that we have here in Chicago. And so I would say that's certainly one of the books that that inspired me, and I would very much encourage other folks. So I'm also glad to say that I'm a friend of Professor Dominic Pasiga, who has some excellent history books, and I'll recommend one of them, which is called Chicago, a Biography. And it's hard to choose just one of Professor Pasiga's one of his books. He writes on a multitude of facets on the history of Chicago, whether it's about the stockyards, industrial workers, and the like. But pressed to it, I'll start with that one.
Dan, tell the listeners where they can find you on the internet and when the election is.
Thank you. So if you want to go, I encourage folks to go on Facebook and to find Dan Pogorzelski for MWRD, and the primary election will be on June the 28th of 2022.
Dan, thanks so much for coming on my podcast.
I appreciate that, George. By the way, keep up the good work. You, as somebody who has also dedicated their lives to public service, it's always a pleasure to talk to you and connect with someone who always has the best interests of his community in mind.
Thank you so much for those kind words, Dan. Talk to you soon.
Thanks.
Bye.
Help George stay on the Chicago Heights City Council. Go and donate today at tinyurl.com/AldermanGeorge 2023.
Begin to transform your life and work towards inner peace with expert psychotherapy. At True Heights Treatment, our experienced therapists provide personalized, compassionate care to help you overcome life's challenges and reach your goals. Whether you're struggling with depression, anxiety, relationship issues, or other mental health concerns, our team is here to support you. With a warm and welcoming in-person and virtual office atmosphere and a commitment to person-centered and evidence-based treatments, we are dedicated to helping you address your life's challenges. Contact us now to schedule your first session at 708-248-7039 or online at trueheightstx.com. Book your appointment today and start your journey towards a happier, healthier life.
Need more George? Like his pages on Facebook. Friends of George Brassey PAC, Fifth Ward Business Alliance, Chicago Heights Bicycle and Pedestrian Resource Center, and the George Brassey Podcast.